Добрый день, уважаемые участники.
Good afternoon, dear participants. We're happy to welcome you here at our expert discussion that is dedicated to the new Police of Kazakhstan, modern challenges to the society. Today, our event will be in online format. This event is held due to the project that our center carries out. The project is called Participation of the Civil Society in the Information Policy in Kazakhstan, and the project is implemented with the support of the British Embassy to Nur-Sultan. We're really grateful to the embassy for supporting our efforts related to different institutional reforms in Kazakhstan, and we also would like to express our gratitude to the European Union for their support for this event. Today we're discussing different issues related to the police in Kazakhstan. We have mentioned that there is a number of reforms in this area, and we believe it's important to establish a dialogue between the state and the civil society. And today we would like to suggest the discussion of the prospects of the development of the police in Kazakhstan. And throughout our meeting, our experts, sociologists, and other experts will discuss the current challenges and the questions of the society. They will also prepare specific recommendations on the reforms. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Kathy Leach, who is the ambassador of UK to Kazakhstan. And as I have said, today's event was made possible thanks to the support of the embassy. Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, Татьяна. И уважаемые участники,
dear
экспертного
participants
обсуждения.
of the expert
Я хочу
discussion,
сказать несколько слов на
I would
русском
like to
языке.
say a
Я
couple
надеюсь,
words in
это
Russian.
слышно.
I hope that you can hear me well.
Это слышно, да?
Yes, we can hear you.
Значит, посольство Великобритании в
The
Нур-Султане имеет
embassy of the
большой
United
опыт
Kingdom in Nur-Sultan
поддержки
has a
правительства
great
Казахстана в разработке
experience in
реформ, в том
providing
числе
support
в
to
области
Kazakhstan in implementation of
верховенства
different
права
reforms,
и
including in
прав
the area of
человека.
the
Для нас
rule of
большая
law, as
честь
well as human rights.
поддерживать
For us, it is
именно
a
вот этот
great
проект,
honor to
реализуемый
support
Центром
specifically this
исследования правовой
project
политикой
that is
по
carried out
разработке
by
стратегических рекомендаций
the
по
center,
ключевым
as
областям
well as the
законодательства.
recommendations that are being
Я рада
developed within the
приветствовать
project.
всех
I'm
на
happy to
таком
welcome
актуальном
everybody at
мероприятии
such a
сегодня.
relevant event today.
Трагические январские события
The tragic
еще раз
events that took
подчеркнули
place in
необходимость
January underlined once
изменения
again
в
the need
функционировании
for the change
деятельности
of
полиции. Именно
police
сейчас
operations.
институциональная реформа
And
правоохранительных
specifically now,
органов
the
и судебной
institutional
системы
reforms as well
являются
as the
главными
reforms in the
приоритетами
judiciary
для
system
всех стран
are the main priorities
постсоветского
for all the
пространства.
countries of the
Главной целью
post-Soviet Union
реформы, на наш
countries.
взгляд,
And one
должно
of
стать
the main
создание
goal of the
полиции,
reforms, in our view,
подотчетной
is to create
обществу
the police that
и
is
эффективной предотвращении и
reporting
расследовании
to the
преступлений при
society
должном
and
соблюдении прав
that
человека.
would
Существует
deal with
также
any
и
issues,
высокий
keeping in mind
общественный
human
запрос
rights.
на реформу полиции.
Thus, there
Самое
is a
главное,
great need for such
полиция должна
reforms.
стать
Most importantly,
автономной
the
правоохранительной
police needs to become
организацией.
an
Мы
autonomous and
приветствуем
independent
недавнее
organization.
заявление со
We
стороны
welcome
президента
recent
и
words that
правительства
were
о
voiced by the
планах по
president and
увеличению
the
технических
government
возможностей
regarding
полиции
the
и других
increase of the
правоохранительных органов.
technical
Однако также
capacities of the law
важно
enforcement
не
agencies.
упустить
But it
возможности
is
для
also
более глубинной
important to
реформы полиции.
not miss the opportunity
Рецептом
for
для
deeper
улучшения
reforms
ситуации
of the
могут стать
police.
рекомендации по реформе полиции, по примеру
Recommendations
Европы,
as for the police
сформулированные по концепции
reforms
трех малых
might be
«Т»,
developed. And for
которые
example,
превращаются в
in
одну
Europe,
большую «Т».
there are
Но, как вы все знаете,
such recommendations
малыми
as well.
«Т»
As you all
являются
know,
деполитизация, децентрализация
there are also important
и
issues such as
демилитаризация.
demilitarization,
В Новой Европе после краха
and others.
Берлинской
In
стены
Kazakhstan, after
это
sorry,
привело
in
к
Europe
большой
after
«Д»
the Berlin Wall,
демократизации
there
полиции.
was a big process of
Конечно,
democratization
несмотря
of the
на
police.
различия
And
национальных
even
правовых
though there are
институтов, а
differences
также
of
правовых культур
national
и
and legal
традиций,
institutes as well as the
страны, как
legal
правило,
culture,
имеют
the
нечто
countries,
общее
as a
в этом
rule, usually
процессе.
have something in common
Сейчас в
in this
Казахстане
process.
самые важные шаги в этом
Now, for
направлении,
Kazakhstan,
наверное,
the most
следующие.
important step is as
Выделение
follows:
полиции как сервисного
is to
органа из
make sure that the
Министерства
police as the
внутренних дел. Это
service-oriented
в-первых.
body. This
Во-вторых,
is first and
внедрение
foremost.
исключительно
Second
конкурсного
is the
отбора на
introduction
должности
of the
служащих полиции, в
competition-based
том числе
recruitment for the
руководящего
police's
состава.
positions as well as
В-третьих,
at the
закрепление в
executive level.
законе прозрачных процедур
Third is
продвижения по
to
службе.
have transparent
И, в-четвертых,
processes and
введение
procedures
четкой и
stipulated by
открытой
the law, as well as a clear and
дисциплинарной
a
процедуры
transparent
и порядка
disciplinary
увольнения лиц
procedure.
службы, когда надо.
Similarly, it is
Децентрализация
related not only to hiring,
органов
but to firing
правопорядка
personnel.
может происходить как путем создания местной
All these
полиции,
reforms
так и
can
повышения
happen
отчетности и подконтрольности
through
национальной
the
полиции
reforms of the
местным
local
общинам.
police as well as through
Местная
the
полицейская
modernization
служба
of the
должна служить
national police.
местным сообществам, а значит
Local police
носить более
should serve the local
муниципальный и
communities.
сервисный характер. Демилитаризация должна привести к привлечению
Demilitarization
исключительно гражданских государственных
should make
служащих
sure
в
that
аппарате
only
министерства и
civil
органов правопорядка. Приток новых гражданских кадров
people are engaged.
позволит
And
изменить,
the
мы
involvement
надеемся,
of new civil
культуру и качество
people
работы
will
органов
make sure that
правопорядка.
the law enforcement agencies'
Ну, я сегодня
operations
желаю вам
change at its core.
всем
And
участникам обсуждения
I wish to all the
плодотворной
participants a
дискуссии.
great and
Я
fruitful
особенно
discussion.
хочу поблагодарить
And I would
Татьяну
like to especially
Зинович
thank
и ее команду
Tatiana Zinovich
за
and
их
her
работу,
team
их
for their
усилию,
work, for their
энергию. Спасибо,
efforts, their
Татьяна. И
energy.
я
Thank
сейчас
you very
передам
much.
слово.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Today, we also welcome European Union, who also supported this event. And it is with great pleasure that I would like to give the floor to Mr. Yankauskas, the ambassador of the European Union to Kazakhstan. Please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Please nod if you can. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Today, European Union is gladly connecting to your event from an unusual location, from Karaganda University, and we're surrounded by colleagues and experts. Today, we visit Karaganda University, and we have meetings with the management of the university, with students. We discuss all the challenges that exist in the current situation, especially how to move forward as far as investments in the future are concerned, research, education, and how European Union and there were also two ambassadors of Czech Republic and of Slovakia who are here with me today. They also have some discussion that they held with university. Also students took an active part in this discussion. It just happened so that Karaganda and also have a colleague here from OC. OC actually has a pilot project on introduction of the service-oriented police in Karaganda city. And I believe that our experts will share this experience with all of us. European Union also finances a project. Our implementing body is the Legal Policy Research Center. This project has been launched back in 2020 with a significant amount of investment and some successes. But I will let it up to the experts to speak to the achievements that were made and about the prospects. I'm hopeful that this pilot project will be successful, and I truly hope that this model in the nearest future will be implemented and distributed to other cities. As a welcoming speech, after all the words that have already been said by my colleague, by the British ambassador, I would like to say a couple words about the work that we're doing during the current situation. Our project was launched back in 2020 when a new agreement on the expanded cooperation between the EU and Kazakhstan got into force. All EU country members, all 27 of them, are ready to share the best experience that we have in order for your country not to spend extra time and extra effort on the mistakes that we have already made. We're ready to share the experience we have acquired, what already works and what doesn't. We can share all this information with you. Different models were introduced actually, and you can take the best practices, what fits you the most, and what can be easily translated into the Kazakhstan reality. I'm sure that we're all looking forward to tomorrow's speech by the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and many of us, myself included, will be at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I invite you to come and listen to the speech with the translation and the further discussion of the speech. We're all looking forward to hearing about the further reforms. Initially, they were planned for September, but probably it is not by accident that the priorities changed and the priority moved up to March. If you can do something today, don't postpone it till tomorrow. We're also looking forward to identifying specific steps and reforms that will also enable us introduce this new model of the police and implement it throughout the country. This project becomes even more important after the tragic January event. The country was shaken, and we were all closely following the events. And I'm sure we all agree that we need to change the approaches and general relation between the police and the society. This relation needs to be built not on fear, or not on punishment, but on trust and cooperation. How can that be done? Well, again, I'm leaving that up to the experts. They already have some results of their work, and it will be very interesting for me as well to hear about these results and to listen to these speeches. And again, based on the experience we and they already have, and let me say again that based on the agreement between the EU and Kazakhstan, we will continue our programs, we will keep developing them. And the EU sees Kazakhstan as a partner. We want to keep continuing a sustainable society aimed at the future. And based on our European experience, we know for sure that if we want to build a modern society, it needs to be built based on the principle of inclusiveness, allowing each and everyone to make their contribution without leaving anybody behind. These principles are the principles of the modern society. I will stop at that. Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate today, and we will keep in touch with our experts, those who are closely involved in the project. We will listen to your experience as well, and we will see how we will keep working based on the experience we have. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Dear participants, briefly, I will explain the format of today's event. Our event is an online event. We also have a live feed in YouTube on our channel, LPRC channel. Feel free to send any questions to this channel, and the live feed also goes to Facebook. We have two rooms. One room is this one that was panelists, and we also have attendees. Once we move to the discussion, we will make sure that attendees, all the participants, have the opportunity to ask their question. They can raise their hand and participate in discussion. The discussion will take place after all the speeches. We have 5 speeches altogether, and now I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Alexey Kazimirovich Miluk. He is the Deputy Chairman of the Administrative Police Department of Ministry Internal Affairs, Republic of Kazakhstan. Mr. Miluk is also Chief Manager of the pilot project of the developing the service model of Kazakhstani police. This project is being implemented by the Ministry of Internal Affairs jointly with our center, with the support of the European Union, and soon this project will come to an end, and we are hoping that we will be able to share the results of this pilot project, and it can be a separate forum dedicated to the service police. Mr. Miluk, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Tatiana. First of all, let me thank the organizers for this opportunity to speak at this event. The Ministry of Internal Affairs carries out a significant reform of the law enforcement agencies. The goal of these reforms is to create a modern, technological, and trustworthy law enforcement body. The main tool of the reform is the roadmap that was approved of by the government. This program document stipulates the implementation of 9 main areas of work, including 127 different activities. The first area is the optimization of personnel and staff. 106 different units were disposed of, and we also cut down the number of personnel of the ministry. Second is the improvement of the social protection of our personnel. Starting back in June 2021, we have a diversified remuneration system, and we will keep on increasing remuneration of the personnel. We also expanded the number of different positions that are allowed to receive some assistance as far as their accommodation is concerned. Starting this year, our personnel will be able to participate in the construction of their apartments through the share agreement. We have also optimized the different educational institutions. We have only kept the 3 best ones so far. We also have some further educational programs at the bachelor degree. Special short-term and long-term courses were introduced, and they are practice-oriented. In 2021, based on Almaty Academy, we created a department where the executive level personnel can be trained. June last year, we had first cohort of graduates of this department. In the same academy, we also have a department of preparing executive level of rayon level. Next goal is we need to exclude all the non-core function. The protection of a number of administrative buildings will be now outsourced. The first stage, 72 facilities will be given to the outsource, and the second stage even more so. And almost 3,000 positions have been reduced. We're talking about the new format of communicating with society. We also carry out different campaigns, such as Come Talk to Us or Open Doors policy. There are also personal accounts that have been opened for the police personnel in different social media. In order to have a quick information, we have also launched an information portal, police.kz. Regularly, we carry out briefings, and it often is done online. The heads of different services speak at these events. We also have the reporting done. Next one is the combating the corruption.
The functions of registering transport and handing out driver's licenses have been transferred to the population service centers. It's been digitized, and we're also digitizing administrative and criminal procedures. We've automated and digitized the larger part of government services, and staff of penitentiary institutions now have chest video cameras. There's also a mobile app to report crimes and lost items. This allows citizens to report to the police in any way is convenient for them, using messengers and social networks as well. Work is being done on implementing video surveillance in penitentiary institutions and police departments, and much more. Currently, we're actively working on implementing the service approach to prevention of crimes. And the importance of scaling up that work was noted in the President's message to Kazakhstan, 1st of September 2021. And we are thankful especially to the OSCE office in Nur-Sultan and the European Union for the rendered financial and expert support to implement such important projects for the Kazakhstani police. It's important to understand that we are jointly implementing two service model projects. The first one under the auspices of the OSCE, a Karaganda project to involve the local community and other stakeholders in order to solve safety issues. The second one under the auspices of the EU, based on the capital police, in order to build up new effective ways of managing police oriented at the needs of the local community. For each of the OSCE and EU projects, 300,000 euros each were allocated. As for the Karaganda project, it's being scaled to all the regions in the country. In the regional centers and large cities, we created similar project groups which are gathering and processing data, mapping the territory, identifying problems, and coming up with solutions for them. And the local community participates actively in these working groups. The Karaganda working group is spreading their experience across the whole region now. And the preliminary results of the Astana project, our other speaker will talk about. They're in the agenda. I think it's going to be interesting for us to talk about these solutions together. And we're also considering to create a comfortable and safe infrastructure and digitizing the police activities. And this year we'll develop a project of transferring to the service model. And these are the measures overall that the ministry is doing to reform the police. If there are questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you very much.
Благодарю вас. Спасибо большое за ваше выступление.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We're very happy that the Ministry of Internal Affairs is demonstrating such openness in discussing possible reforms, not only of the police, but law enforcement in general. We'd also like to especially note the openness of the ministry in relation to these initiatives that were just stated and that were incentivized and pushed for by the civil society. We know that at the founding blocks of the service police was a big public demand for serious reforms. I would like, I see that we already have some questions, and we have one question to Mr. Meluk. Ainur, please, if you could introduce yourself and ask your question, you can turn your microphone on. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Ainur Arenova. I'm from the methodology department. of we are a JSC in which the government is 100% participant, and we're doing testing for a government civil service. And I'd like to ask, in this field of testing for civil service, will there be reforms? So to this meeting, I invited my Israeli colleagues, and they're suggesting to do testing on countering corruption. So just to test potential staff if they're prone to corruption, and we can test the current employees and the candidates like this. So I'd like to know about the reforms that we will have, or will we have these reforms in this field?
Да, пожалуйста.
I'd like to apologize. I didn't quite hear the question, unfortunately. I had something wrong with my internet. Could you please repeat? Yes, this is the National Center for Staff Management of Civil Service. We're doing a testing for civil service, including the law enforcement. Will there be reforms in the field of selecting candidates for law enforcement service? I think for everyone here, it's not a secret that the quality of staff is defined by who we select in the end. And we would like improvement in this field. And to this meeting, I invited my Israeli colleagues. It's Medud company, which is a renowned leader in the field of testing, integrity testing, trying to identify how much a person is prone to corruption and violating the rules. And they do testing like that, and I invited them here today. Our suggestion is we offer to reform testing and staff selection to select by expertise and competencies. What competencies does the candidate have, whether they're sufficient, and testing for corruption proneness, and we can test the current employees and the candidates. So I'd like to ask, will there be any reforms in that? Thank you for the question. Undoubtedly, all the reforms are based on selecting quality staff, which will be working with the citizens. And I can tell you that with the arrival of the new Ministry of Internal Affairs, they're focusing especially on that. And they've already given an order to develop criteria of assessing the law abiding nature of staff when appointing them to a certain position. We have an HR department in charge of that, and they are working on this mechanisms to do it. And these changes will definitely influence in a good way staff selection, quality staff selection. These issues will definitely also be included in the new model of the service police. Can I comment a bit though? For instance, we were never invited to participate in discussing reforming in staff selection because we could also provide some suggestions. We brought our Israeli colleagues here, our colleagues from Israel, the company Medud. They're members of the International Testing Committee. It's a respected organization. We're ready to cooperate and we'll be very happy if we're involved in this sphere because we do have proposals.
Thank
you very much. We did hear you. And as I already mentioned, we are shaping the plan of the concept of shifting to the service model. And to develop it, we will have a pilot working group established. I would like to get your contacts, if I may, and then we'll send the request when we're establishing the concept developer working group. We'll definitely take your suggestion into account. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I would like to pass the floor to our next speaker because when we're talking about any reforms, they're usually dictated by assessment of effectiveness. So why do we need to reform things? Because we assess how effective a certain government institution is. And now I'd like to pass the floor to our next speaker, who is Janibek Aygazin. He's the General Director of the Center for Research of Applied Economics. And his presentation is about the assessment of effectiveness of the state bodies in Kazakhstan in general and approaches to assessing the effectiveness of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in particular. Thank you very much, Tatiana. I'd like to welcome the participants of today's discussion. I'll try to be brief. My presentation, as you already said, is about the assessment of the effectiveness of state bodies and approaches on assessing the effectiveness of the MIA. We can see your screen. Yes, could you please make it full screen mode? Apologize, let me try to do that. We can see your PDF in window view.
Все видно, да?
You can see it now. Right, this is briefly it. So I'm the General Director of the Applied Economics Research Center. This is what we do. We do research, including we had 2 pieces of research about crime and punishment, empirical analysis, and bribes and punishment in Kazakhstan. But based on the data that was available, we tried to extract patterns that would characterize a certain crime. All of this you can find on our website. And this is relating to the topic today. We also do a macro economic reviews. So specifically for a topic, assessing the effectiveness of state bodies, the main message we should understand is that the state is a service provider, or it's a service through which it carries out its function. When we say we're all taxpayers, as the Iron Lady said, there is no state money, there's only taxpayer money. Unfortunately, we do have an understanding of what effectiveness is, but there might be some confusion there. So effectiveness is achieving the best results with the smallest expenses, such as labor, money, and time. There's also social effect, environmental effect, budgetary effect. All of that is widely publicly available, but most importantly, we're talking about the effectiveness of government money. We should achieve effectiveness and achieve results, and those results should be as cheap as possible for the taxpayer. Why we're talking about assessing the effectiveness of state expenditure, it's a difficult thing to do, by the way, because in our system of government planning, not all the target indicators that are there that are in the legal documents in the 2050 strategy, in the 2025 plan, they're not all tied to the strategic plans of the ministry. It's called the development plan as of today. And our economy is not that large. Also, according to the system of national accounts, only 10% of the expenses are state expenses. And we don't have a clear connection between spending 1 tenge of state money with the services that the population receives. So the government services are not customer oriented. Apart from that, it's very difficult to understand and calculate what the effectiveness is of administrators of budget programs relating to specific sectors, law enforcement, defense, and it's almost an impossible task. So how effective are the hospitals? How effective are the roads that were built using transfers from the state or regional budget? Or how effective is a school or a cultural building? And we also have a problem that many target indicators that are in the strategy are not reinforced with resources. They're not backed up by resources. Because we have a centralization of all resources, almost 80% of income, state income is collected at the level of the Republican budget, national budget. We also have 100% priority of expense executions over rationality. So if it's in the budget, then it needs to be executed. Otherwise, next year, you're going to get less budget. Apart from that, we have a lack of motivation of administrators of budget programs to save money, because there's a risk that for the next year, they might reduce your budget. Apart from that, the administrators of budgetary programs don't have authority, and they're not empowered to, on their own, solve priority tasks. And also our key target indicators are not tied to resources. So there are resources, but there is no strong link between the two. And based on that, the ministry itself has a weak influence on the target indicators themselves. As an example, I'm showing the plan of development, the target indicators of the Ministry of Healthcare. For example, out of 25 indicators in its development plan, only 12 are those that they can impact, because the main indicators, they don't have a lot of influence over them because they don't have the resources to do so. For instance, the life expectancy at birth. This is not only a healthcare issue. These are also issues that start from social, economic, mental, infrastructure, and things. This is the task of the whole state. And second is Trade and Integration Ministry. The ministry is more kind of a regulatory body. We have a market economy. They don't command the economy. How can they impact the growth of labor productivity? We don't have any SOEs, for instance, in wholesale and retail trade. So out of these 12, they can only impact 4 indicators. Industry and infrastructure development, that's the super ministry that included in itself not only regulating the real sectors, but also the infrastructure. Out of 42, they can only impact 4, though. And the issue of those indicators, they're outside of the perimeter of specific ministries, and they just don't have A, authority, B, resources, and C, they do this just to tick a box. And so budget planning, which is implementing our strategic goals, because we have strategic planning, right? And the main thing is we should integrate strategic planning with budget planning. All of that should be interconnected. It should be in one tool. It's budget, it's result-oriented budget. It's a tool that will help us understand what the effectiveness is, what the priorities are in our budget, and what specifically we're spending our money on in order to get a result. In 2008, we had that concept, a plan on implementation of this result-oriented budget. Unfortunately, it didn't take off from there. And either these are results, bigger results for the same money, or same results for less money. This is what we should strive for. And now let me move on to the topic of the day, the effectiveness of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Now the main tool which we need after we've implemented a result-oriented budget, we need to understand what the effectiveness is of the separate units that have the authority and have the resources. This so-called DEA, data and development analysis. It's an instrument that can help in using best practices and using resources in a specific organization, and it can help improve effectiveness and realize the potential of specific units of the government, not only of state bodies, but also can be used in commercial organizations. So it's widely used in Europe, in the US, and for those organizations where it's pretty hard to assess. It's, as I said, expenses for law enforcement, healthcare, and things like that. What is DEA? It's assessment in comparison by effectiveness of specific departments of an organization. So what we're measuring is for output, our result, right? Our output, how much resources do you need? That's in a simplified way, the DEA concept. So as an example, I'm showing you here the example with one variable. We have, for instance, a few branches, and there are these, this is a simplified way of seeing it. And this is the effectiveness boundary. This is the effectiveness that is achieved by a specific unit with their set of resources. That's their effectiveness.
We
can see that there are different combinations of different branches, and you can see the best indicators for each person. And here is a simplified model of the different stages. There are a total of 5 different steps, starting with the selection of input and output parameters, then identification of the number of decision-making units for the analysis. After that, we prepare the data. Then we choose the model of TA, and then we receive the results. And basically, I already covered all that. That DE will define the mathematical weights. Unfortunately, there are certain challenges to it, or certain limits, such as a lack of data, actually the problem of the shift and the problem of positivity. The package itself can be used in a non-specific program, and you can also use it in Excel and in other programs. We need to decide what our input and output data are. And we just need to know the plan of the development of the ministry. That will be our output. Input is what we already know. So at this stage, we will decide on the effectiveness level. It will show who reached this level and who did not reach the level. And again, it will all depend on our input and output data. There will be certain modification. Keep in mind the regression analysis, different coefficients. All of that will be done at the data collection and analysis stage. D has been used in order to identify the effective system of healthcare. It was also used in Hungary, where they carried out the analysis of different hospitals with a certain number of beds. So they showed that some facilities work quite effectively and some were less effective. There was also research for the European Community countries for 5 input and 4 output that showed the most effective healthcare system from the DE system were in Sweden, UK, and Romania. Now, for law enforcement, DA can be, of course, used for law enforcement agencies as well. Government and Rugella assessed effectiveness of the law enforcement agencies using DA. They had 3 input variants: the number of officers, the number of other personnel, and the number of cars. And they had 3 output data, such as the crime level, with the breakdown of different types of crimes, such as murder, rape, and other type of crimes. And the results showed that most of different states are technically effective, but half of them works lower than the optimal threshold. The same can be used in the education system. There are even more cases here. For example, with the DA, the economic effectiveness of 172 Vietnamese universities were studied between 2012 and 2016. And let me share these tools with you, the Frontier Analyst software. And as I said earlier, it can also be used in Excel. It is rather easy to do in Excel. You can use all the links and all of that. You just input your own data and then you receive the result that you need. Most importantly is to define our own goals. What do the taxpayers pay for? Can implement these goals, such as economic growth or eradication of crimes. These are the goals not just for one ministry or for one system, be healthcare or education. These are goals that are very much intertwined. These are the goals for society. And these goals should and can be reached. But of course, for that, we need certain resources for that. So after that, we can define the norms, the goals, etc., etc. And after that, once we understand what sort of results we want, what type of resources we have, then we can use DA. So more specifically, we start with goals, and then we can develop specific tools to reach those goals. Thank you. Thank you. It's clear that our approach to reforms should be scientific and empirical. That is why we invited these experts today to share their experience with us. They have experience in economic, social, and other fields. On this multiplication effect or multifaceted approach can give us the result that we want. Thank you very much for your speech. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Serik Bisimbaev. He's an infection specialist. And the next speech is dedicated to the view of the Kazakhstani police in the community, in the society. Please, Serik, the floor is yours. Thank you, Tatiana. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am happy to welcome all of you at this event. As Tatiana said, I am a sociologist. I'm not an expert specifically in law enforcement agencies. So my goal today is to speak about the image that law enforcement have among their local population. So here's my presentation on the screen. I hope you can see it. And before I start, I would like to say a couple words. First of all, we have very few research as far as the perception of the police and its activity by the society. Maybe there are 3 or 4 research results that are available in an open format. So I will talk about the research that was carried out in Kazakhstan. Also, when we talk about perception by the society, we should say that it is a very dynamic process, of course, that is impacted by everything that's taken place. And again, what I'm going to show you right now might not reflect the current situation because a lot has changed after the January events. When we start looking at the data that we have, first of all, we have the results of the questionnaire, whether you trust the police. Here, there is quite a contradictory view that is provided by different sources. For example, you see the data from the Bureau of Statistics of Republic of Kazakhstan. This research takes place every year. And the question is whether you agree or disagree with the statement that you can trust law enforcement agencies. So you can see that 77% to a certain degree can trust law enforcement agencies. Now let's look at other surveys, such as World Values Survey. It is a big project that looks at different values throughout different countries. And one of the important questions that they ask is the perception of different state agencies, including the law enforcement. In Kazakhstan, this survey took place in 2017 last time, and you see the information right now. And this is the index of law enforcement agencies trust, and you see that Kazakhstan is located in the middle of this rating. If we look at the results, more than 65% of respondents said that they trust police one way or another. And looking at the index, you see that the index is 60 compared to other countries. And this position is not that bad. We also have data from the independent service, specifically from the strategy center. In 2017, they carried out this survey. So the results were that 53% of respondents trust the police. We looked at 3 different sources and we received 3 different types of data. Of course, once these data are out, they usually received in a very skeptical way. But generally, this is the situation. As I said, this area is not well researched, and there is no systematic measurement of these values, such as trust to law enforcement agency. At the same time, when people are asked whether they trust the police or not, we also need to understand that this question is asked not just regarding the police, but also regarding other law enforcement agencies. Police is just one of them. So international survey, World Values Survey, asked the same question. We see that the number of respondents who says that they trust the police, they would rather actually trust the police. And at the same level, there is trust to the judiciary system, to government, civil servants. So trust to police is not just trust to police, but basically it is the trust to different institutions of the state. Now, if we talk about the image of police, of course, we understand there are different factors that contribute to formation of such an image. First of all, it's the personal practice or day-to-day experience. It's the information that we receive from social media, from mass media, cinema, etc. But there is also historical memory and stereotypes that are typical of any society. Based on my observations, I would like to speak about 3 main images that the Kazakhstani perceive as far as police is concerned. So the most important image is police as the supplier of the safety, so to speak. So someone who can guarantee your safety. Someone who fights with criminals, and it's clear that it is its main function. But here we also see that in Kazakhstani society, there is also a big need for safety and security. Following the same survey that I mentioned earlier, the World Values Survey, Kazakhstan is one of those countries where security value is dominant over other values such as freedom In other countries, such as Western European countries, people value more their own freedom, personal freedom, over their security. So here we see a bit of a different image. And you see the rating of the fears that exist in society. And rising crime is one of the fears among society. So 63% of respondents said that they fear rising crime. So second image of police, and it is quite a well perceived image, so to speak. The police as a symbol of the Kazakhstani corruption. And this image contradicts what we said earlier, because on the one hand, most people trust the police, but they also believe that police is one of the most corrupt services. The information here is from the Transparency Kazakhstan. They asked people, those who did not have anything to do with corruption. They just asked, who do you think is the most corrupt body? And you see that police is one of the first one. 39.4% respondents said that police is the most corrupt one. Even though those who did have to deal with corruption, they said that state hospitals and polyclinics are the most corrupt. So that's quite interesting. Here we talk about the mass perception. The person wearing a uniform, a police uniform, this person must be corrupt. This is the perception, especially when talk about the road police. Even though the road police actually undergone a significant reform, but nevertheless, stereotype is still there. And third image is police as the tool of repressions. We don't have data for this image. We did not carry out any survey in this regard. However, over the last years, with the view of the increased number of protests and quite significant response to these protests by the police, here is the new image, police as a tool of repression.
Мы вот видим, что когда мы говорим о полиции, полиция...
When we talk about police, well, police is not unified, but if you look at the mass perception, of course, we know that there will be different stereotypes and different images. It's related to the fact that police by itself is comprised of different services. Criminal police that actually fights crimes, that's the road police that regulates the traffic. It's also the National Guard that provides security during a protest, etc. We developed this poster for our discussion regarding the reform in the police. This is the perception that exists. There are official sources that demonstrate police as a good example to follow, as the servicemen of their country, the people who provide law and order. On the other hand, there are mass media, social media that demonize the policemen. And so that shows an alternative side. And this is the juxtaposition that a regular policeman has to face. And this is how the police in Kazakhstan has to position itself. It's very hard to come to any conclusions, but nevertheless, I would like to say that mass surveys are quite often used in order to manipulate, and I wouldn't suggest using the results to measure the effectiveness of the police operations. This is quite often what the state services do in different programs. This is an indicator of effectiveness, efficiency, And unfortunately, that turns into a tool for manipulation. At the same time, it doesn't mean that these surveys are not needed. Now, based on our example, we need to look at the police operations in its context. Specifically, and now we're looking into the issues of January events and how Kazakhstani people perceive the actions of the police during the January events. Also, I believe it's important that any measurements need to be done systematically, and we need to assess the activity of specific services or specific departments. And what is lacked here is, for example, the information that this is the opinion of the people from Astana or Almaty and not from some other places. So we need to understand the specific geography. And at the end, as a summary, and keeping in mind today's roundtable and keeping in mind the general political agenda, I would like to say that police reforms is not just to improve the image of the police. It's not about PR. It's about much more. Yes, PR, the image is important, but this is not what the reform is about. We need to make sure that civil society is engaged and the society has been developed by now and it has its own vision of how the police should change. And second, reform of the police is not the reform of just one state body. And no, we need to do it in a more complex or comprehensive way, like it has been said by other speakers. There is a need for change, need for reforms, and these changes are linked to the changes in the law enforcement agencies. After the January events, we see that the reform in law enforcement agencies is one of the key points in how Kazakhstani see their own future or any changes to come. As it has been said about tomorrow's speech by the president, I personally hope that there will be something about the reform of the law enforcement agencies. That's it from my side, and I look forward to your feedback.
За такой важный и очень
Thank you very
подробный
much, Sarek, for this important and detailed review about what the image of the Kazakhstani police is that's being shaped in the society. Now to our next expert, Gulir Kalieva. She's an expert of our center. Nazgul Yergalieva. She's the expert that we involved as part of our project in regards to shaping legal policy in Kazakhstan, which is conducted with the support of the British Embassy in Nur-Sultan, which is also what's sponsoring our discussion today. She will talk to us about the reforming of police activities. Hello, dear participants of this expert discussion. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Now, I'd like to say straight away that I'm really lucky to participate as a national expert in the pilot project on developing the Kazakhstani service police model. But today, I'm not here to talk about that. I hope that the Ministry of Internal Affairs, together with all the experts who participated in this project, will provide another platform, another forum to talk about the specific results, because there were very many results, in spite of whatever opinions there may be on how ineffective the project was. And in particular, as Sarek said, we did a research, an expert research in the capital city on what the citizens expect from the police officers. And we did a survey on the satisfaction with the service of the police, a survey of the quality, a research of the quality of the service. This was a research in order to get hard evidence based on which we could do recommendations. And we can't wait to share these results with the public and with the expert community, because in our opinion, just having this hard evidence will improve decision-making about what to do next. Now, as for my today's presentation, I'd like to briefly tell you about the strategic development trends that the expert community is offering for the future, for the near future, for how we see the police of the future. And for that, I'd like to briefly tell you about the 7 key development lines that we want to talk about. Issues of tactics. So what it should start with today, especially after the tragic events, and what approaches to change is important to apply in order to avoid that ineffectiveness that we were seeing in our previous reforms, because there were many police reforms, but still we are where we are now. So I'd like to quote this narrative that was in the room in 2018 with the activists after the tragic events when our Olympic champion Dennis Ten was killed. And that narrative in 2018 was voiced that we don't need a reform of the police, we need a new police. And I think this narrative continues to be relevant in spite of there were very many measures taken since 2018. In what degree did these measures actually lead to a significant change in the perception or the quality of the service of the police? We can't really say. And in terms of formulating the goal, I'd like to voice this objective here. And I think we have good tools here, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We have a guideline, an OSCE guideline on the democratic police, and just comparing these goals against the best practices internationally, we can say that we're trying to create a democratic police as a state service on ensuring public safety and guarding public order based on trust, partnership, and accountability to society. Every word has been weighed here and is based on what the actual issues are with the police today. Now, in order to achieve this goal, we're seeing characteristics of achieving that goal by achieving 3 strategic results. So what are the 3 outcomes that should stem from these activities? So the first result, if we envision the police of the future, the first outcome that we should see is that they have a new mission. The Kazakhstani police has legitimacy based on the public trust, the confidence of the citizens in their professionalism, and their compliance with the development demands of the public. Accountability. The police is an organization accountable to the people, and they guarantee the priority of protecting the higher values, the human rights of the person. And then the effectiveness. The police is a modern organization that effectively and transparently uses the financial and other resources in order to provide quality services to the population. Now, for these results to be real and to be in the way that they're depicted here, we are suggesting to organize the work like this in these 7 development trends. The first one is to identify and determine the status, the structure of the mission of the police. So we're not talking about the Ministry of Internal Affairs and law enforcement in general, but just the police. Second is demilitarization and new staffing policy. Third is service-oriented police. 4 is new accountability system. 5th is a new system of effectiveness assessment. New penitentiary service, not system, but service. And evidence-based police. So let me talk about, since we don't have so much time, let me only talk about the key ones. For instance, the topic of the service police, as I already said, we'll be discussing that separately, so I'm not going to dwell on this one here, but let me talk briefly about the rest. Now, the mission structure, status in the mission structure, we suggest that the role of the police be specifically outlined in a separate law. There should be a clear understanding of what the police is as a state service, what its mission is, what are its values and principles. Right now, we don't have clear-cut values like that in the law. We just have the law, which says that the police is a structural department which consists of various units, but there's no clear understanding there. So when we're talking about shaping and developing a new law, then the question will arise, what is police and what is not policing function? And it's important to understand here to draw the line between the ministry as the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the coordinating body on effectively implementing the police's activity in public safety, and the police is a special service which carries out a specific function. And in this regard, this delineation will allow us to, in another way, see how we appoint, for instance, the head of the police. So we can see now that it should be a professional person who can manage the police force. But when we're talking about the ministry, the coordinating body that coordinates the police and coordinates policy and public safety, the minister will be a public figure, and that can be a civilian as well. Right now, because the MIA equals the police in Kazakhstan, and these 120 people or more than 100,000 people that are part of that MIA, that's created this kind of confused notion of what the police is, confusing notion. And how can we talk about the effectiveness of this body when everybody that's in law enforcement is seen as the police? Second is a new system of assessing effectiveness. Our colleague, we let them speak first because he said he had to make it to another meeting. And he told us very well right now that when we're talking about the new system of assessing the effectiveness of police, then we should talk about it as a state service which works and operates from taxpayer money. And this assessment system should show in an unbiased way how effectively the police is using resources, human and financial resources, and what is seen as an outcome of their activity, and what is seen as an achievement, and how can we assess input versus output. So we have about 160 abbreviation, and that's 165 police departments, and this system should give us the opportunity to objectively assess the effectiveness of each police department. And when we're talking about the new system of assessing effectiveness, first of all, we're talking about new indicators. Now, the main performance indicators now for the police is the criminal and legal statistics. And we believe that the indicators should be built around the person and not around statistics. And it should revolve around the person and not the crime. And the key performance indicators should be not resolved cases. When we've used this indicator for so long, and it has a point, but when we're talking about the new police, we need to understand that this indicator has not proven its effectiveness, at least as of today, and is not in line with those demands that we have. We should have other things serving as indicators, such as how many people have fallen victim to violations, have become victim of violations. And that means that prevention should be one of the key tasks on ensuring public safety. It should be the key one. And what happened to these people, right? So those people that suffered from violations, how effective were they protected? How effectively were they protected afterwards? And here comes the role of the police and how effective the investigation was, were the culprits identified and brought to justice. Now, in terms of trust, I fully agree with our previous expert, Sarek, about the fact that it's a very complex indicator. First of all, it's impacted by a lot of factors and it's hard to assess, and we don't have an effective metric to measure trust. And since we don't have a metric for trust, we can't use that indicator as an operational indicator. It has more of a role of a strategic indicator when it's measured for a certain period of time, 3 to 5 years, and then we measure how the police as an institution, as a service, has changed its role or hasn't changed its role in the perception of society. As I said about effectiveness, there should be a specific methodology, and Janebek, our expert, our economist, already said that there are methodologies out there, so we don't need to reinvent anything. All we need to do is just systemically approach this issue about building this new system of assessing the effectiveness. Can we move on to the next slide, please? A new accountability system. That's also one of the characteristics of the new police that we see for the future. When we're talking about accountability, this is about different levels. The highest level, parliamentary oversight, when there's direct reporting to a special parliamentary committee. The existing mechanism we believe to be these periodic presentations of the minister in front of the parliament is not an effective accountability mechanism. For this purpose, there are many interesting models, including the English model of oversight of the police, when you have a special commission with special authority in order to consider the reports of the police's activity, and then they give recommendations to correct. And in terms of regional control, apart from the overall parliamentary control, it should be accountability at regional level. So the head of each regional police force should report to their community, to Maslikats, should report to the public and kind of provide promises that the police in this region promises to solve this or that problem with security, and promises to achieve these standards of effectiveness and reduce the costs. And every year, these regional heads of police should report to the communities how they lived up to these promises. And judiciary control, this is more about the process that has started a long time ago already. I mean, it's going slowly, but it's progressing. It's what relates to that any rights violations should be the prerogative of the court only. In this case, we're talking about the initiatives of the police on all issues that can in any way infringe upon the constitutional rights. In a case like that, things like that should be only allowed to the court. And when we're talking about accountability, it's also about a special body on investigating crimes committed by the police. And we do have a delineation right now already between crimes that can be investigated against the police. But when we're talking about torture and ill treatment, then there still isn't that perception that there is an independent body investigating these. And following best practices, we believe that in Kazakhstan, it makes sense to create that specific body with authorities to investigate crimes and torture committed by the police. Then evidence-based police. We're seeing that all the police forces of the developed countries are moving in the direction of improving their expertise in analytics, in working with data. Because nowadays, because the criminal world is becoming more sophisticated, it's becoming more digital. So traditional methods of response should also be changing. And the key issue here is how much the police can, over this time, really increase their analytical potential and be ready for those challenges that our society faces nowadays. Here we're talking about the need to build up processes to gather and process information, data, and analyze information in order for it to be used in operational manner to increase the quality of solving tasks. So once again, we don't need to reinvent anything here. We have our best practices available to us. And since September of last year, many police forces have switched to this evidence-based police mode, and there are many services, police services that whose experience we can study. There are new positions out there like analysts, and it should not necessarily be a person with a military, holding a military position, can be a civilian. And of course, this means new processes. There should be a very clear connection between theory and practice, and also scientific methods. Evidence-based police should be using scientific methods of working with data, scientific standards of measurement, because using scientific data will allow to avoid error and that tunnel thinking, which is popular in such organizations as the police. Demilitarization and new staffing policy. When we're doing the research on the effectiveness or best practices of other countries, one of the parameters that we compared was the number of police officers, and how did they identify the need for this number of police officers. And we found out that some countries have a similar police force in size to ours, but still all the other parameters were really different. For instance, England and Kazakhstan have roughly the same number of police officers per capita, but at the same time, they have a lot more crime in England. Trust is a lot higher in England. And we started studying that, why with such a low number of police force, but with a much bigger population, they are still able to handle everything. And we found out that for a long time, they've had this strategy of demilitarization. That means a clear division between police and non-police work. And this clear line is implying what the competencies of police are, that you can delineate that this is the competence of the police officer and only police can do this, and this work can be done by any other civil servant. And that division helps them kind of achieve this. That 70% are professional police officers and 30% are professional civil servants that carry out other functions, not police functions. And what that allows them to do is to focus on building the expertise of the police force. So they keep improving their expertise in what it means to be a police officer and not in what it means how to do some office work.
Plus, it also saves the resources, and when we talk about raising remuneration for policemen, we specifically talk about the salary of policemen and not everybody. Just like right now, we talk about the increase of salary of police, we can't talk about the salaries of 120 people. The functions differ quite significantly, but now they're all called policemen. And also, when we talk about the new personnel policy or new HR policy, we'll need a new system of indicators, new system of motivation. Unfortunately, we can't say that all of that already exists and it works effectively. And now about the new indicators, there is such an indicator as the index of the engagement of personnel. In OECD countries, such index is looked into every year, and there is a direct relation between how the organization works with its personnel and how organization provides for the effectiveness of the work. There is a direct link, so the results depend on how the police works with its personnel. Next. So I briefly outlined the strategic points that we will still need to focus on for the next couple of years in order to develop specific solutions. This is how we see the police of the future. Now, as to how we need to start working on that, what do we start these changes with? First of all is the issue of torture. This is probably the most complex and the most negative issue that impacts the perception of the police. The perception of the police, and most importantly, is how much we can trust the police. So in this regard, of course, this is the issue of goodwill. We need to show the police will truly resolve that. Torture did not start in January. This problem started a long time ago, more than 20 years ago. The NGOs have been talking about that, and unfortunately, we haven't reached any significant results yet. So I believe that in this area, it would be quite useful to start with the law against torture, and it would be good if police initiated this law, of course, through the existing instruments. The previous attempts of such law were blocked. They were blocked also by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Why do we need this law? It is through the law that we can provide for systematic approaches. Only through the law we can make sure that the situation actually changes. It is only the law that can reflect all these issues in a comprehensive way. Another issue would be to separate the functions of the police. Another question that is not resolved is the compensation for victims. There are a lot of recommendations saying that this system of compensation is an effective tool when it comes to the prevention of crime, but it has not been resolved yet. Another issue that we need to start working on is de-bureaucratization. Unfortunately, the police turned into an organization where the main goal is to do paperwork, or a big amount of work is paperwork. So all the results need to be fixed on paper, and we see that the professional policeman turned into a professional bureaucrat. In order to change this situation, of course, we need to make a decision on what part of paperwork we need to keep and what part we can get rid of. At the moment, there is a lot of duplication. Some IT developments already exist, but yet paperwork still remains. Another point that we could change is the automation of reports. The police spends a lot of time on reports. It is a big amount of paper that they need to fill out, and they need to describe their own work, how to do this or that. We believe if we can put this information together and include some automation, then the police wouldn't need to describe their own work. All this data should be aggregated and then used to make decisions. Long and complicated reports that are not well structured don't help at all. The next one is the automation of the quality assessment. One of the steps here is to assess the existing situation first before we can improve it. And then we will need to operationalize it or optimize it. But again, we need to start with the assessment of quality. This way, besides the indicators as far as safety is concerned, they also need to have some other indicators regarding the quality of their service. How do we see it? Now, any decision of a policeman has contact with any citizen has a certain trail. And with a certain IT solution, we could make sure that each person who did have this contact with the policeman to give an assessment of this service. And then we will see how a certain policeman provides certain services at which quality. And we can develop certain indicators such as completeness of services, maybe timeliness, etc. Now, education system. It is another issue that we could start working on right now. We could start with the analysis of the effectiveness of universities. There was a certain optimization of universities, but it doesn't mean that it led to the improvement of the quality. Moreover, and even more important, as all these processes need to be involved in order to constantly improve the qualification of servicemen. At the moment, it is not the case, but I believe that it is a very effective tactics to improve the quality of policemen. And as I said, service police, the work is ongoing in this regard, and I believe here a lot can be done. Still, we need to understand the internal mechanism within the police, not from the external platform. There should be two priorities. First is the problem-oriented approach, how well the police can resolve the problems, and second, how well it can offer good quality service. And at the end, I would like to talk about the approach to all these changes. How do we need to change the police in order to avoid the destiny of the numerous reforms we already have? First of all, engagement, transparency. The trust will only increase once the society and different areas of societies, different segments of society know what's happening, and moreover, they will be able to participate in all these processes. The standards of the evidence-based policy, I keep talking about that. This has proved itself as one of the most effective policy. So the decisions need to be implemented based on empirical data. As far as opinions, we can argue without any results. But once we have evidence, once we have data, then we can make decision. And yet another important point is the change management. What does that mean? It means that when all these changes take place, the police needs to engage and involve their personnel. Of course, there should be not only external communication, but internal ones as well. It is a whole process that is maybe not an obvious one, and it's something we need to work on and make efforts in order to say that our personnel is engaged and we have the opportunity to voice our opinion. Only this way, these changes will become system-wide, and then it will have a positive effect. That's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Nazgul. I do see that you would like to ask questions, but before we turn to questions, I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, last but not least, of course, Mr. Evgeny Zhovtis,
человека, соблюдение законности.
You know Mr. Zhovtis, of course. We have heard the view of economists, of sociologists, experts in law, and now we would like to listen
Полиции.
to the
Евгений Александрович, пожалуйста, вам слово.
moderate activists. Please, Mr. Zhovtis, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can. That's great. Dear participants, I will probably start by saying that tomorrow the President Tokayev will present his view of the needs for the reforms in our society, and this will become very important. Any international organization, any politologist, we can all have a look at the analysis and the rating. Our political system is perceived as the authoritarian one. This is not a secret. But the democratic and political statehood is extremely important in order to provide rule of law. This is one of the important elements of any state. Also, we need to make sure that all the bodies are involved, all the law enforcement bodies. We also need to make sure that the civil society is engaged. And then the engagement of civil society, of independent media, will become a sort of a guarantee that the changes will take place. Once again, we can say a lot about the deficiencies of legislation, about the need for the structural changes of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. But in order to have an effective reform, the audio seems to have stopped for a second.
Удается глава, если, так сказать, вот, а я все-таки имею возможность
The speaker is breaking up. We, unfortunately, still have to deal with the post-Soviet police, with similar qualities and approaches. Something changes, but the law remains the same. We still have those people who were born in the Soviet Union, they were there. And not much changes as far as the approaches are concerned. And then we have not a national but a state approach to the police. Police should be providing the services, the service of safety, security, as well as the fundamental human rights. And my colleagues already spoke to this effect, and Ms. Irgalieva also talked about this. We need to solve 4 interlinked tasks. First of all, we need to reform legislation. And not just the legislation itself. If we talk specifically about human rights and legislation, legislation in different areas, including criminal process, administrative process, and many others. Later, I will speak to that as well. Second is the optimization of work of Ministry of Internal Affairs. I see that some work has been done in this year, that some functions will be outsourced to the civil society, also demilitarization of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and introduction of good governance, which includes transparency and accountability. Third is the revision of competencies and qualifications through education, through training, through capacity building. This will give result only when the first two tasks are resolved. If the first two tasks are not resolved, then it will not happen. However, if the first two tasks are resolved, then we will know what the new police will need to know or to learn. And fourth is the creation of certain foundation for trust. People actually have to deal with police quite often, so the trust to police is really important. The trust is quite low, and the gender events only worsen the situation. On the one hand, people sympathize with the deceased policemen, those who were serving during those times, but on the other hand, peaceful people, civilians also died. So again, there is a lot of tension. I would like to share two examples of a system-wide character of these problems in order to describe how global the goal of reforms is. It's not just improvement, no, it's the new police, and it's a new reform. So let's look at the structural problem. If we'd like to fight torture, then of course there should be demilitarization of certain structures. And I understand that back in 2004, there was a discussion that it should be a separate entity under the Ministry of Justice, but no, I believe it should be a completely separate entity. I'm specifically talking about the detention facility and the pre-trial detention facilities. They need to become a separate entity. And any penitentiary institution should be just an institution, and it should be a separate institution. We also need to review the procedure of the pre-trial detention. We need to make sure that at this stage, human rights are respected. January events demonstrated that there is a lack of certain procedures and processes. This is a separate problem. I will mention that later. And now going back to the fact that for many years the national human rights activists we keep hearing about the creation of an independent investigation body. Unfortunately, we don't have such a body, and the effectiveness of the existing bodies is still not there. This is just one example. I can give you many more examples. I can talk about institutional problems that exist at the moment, but these are the examples I will give you at the moment. Again, these are procedural problems. The right to fair trial, this is one of the foundation of human rights. If this procedure doesn't work, how can you provide a certain defense to this person?
So let's look at this simple example. I just have a bit of time left. Every person which is in the field of interest of the police and law enforcement has a specific legal status. For instance, they've committed a crime or have become a witness of a crime. It can be a witness with a right to protection, a suspect, a convicted person, and so forth. And every status supposes different guarantees of ensuring their rights and protection from violations and abuse. So let's look at our criminal procedure code. Delivery. Delivery, it's a measure of law enforcement to deliver a person to the police department for 3 hours in order to identify whether they are related to the crime or not. And our other procedure states that in detainment, a limitation of the freedom of movement of a person and holding them in a specific place, delivering them to a police department and making them go somewhere or stay in one place, or other actions that significantly detain a person's ability to move, regardless of whatever status the detained person is. And there was a breaking connection. So when you stop the person, after 3 hours, they are a detained person by status. And they should have a specific status and certain rights. And our police believes that this is only a formal procedure. And most importantly, should be responsible for arbitrary detainment and materially responsible. In New Zealand, they pay a compensation from the police department. And our police detains hundreds at peace meetings, peaceful protests, and they hold them for several hours, although you cannot even detain a person for 3 hours unless you identified the person's relation to the violation and haven't explained their rights. And it's supposed that the people should just be thankful that they were eventually let go. And there's another example that there is an explanation note that we have. And I've been trying to figure out in which legal status should you write and sign this explanatory note. Of course, the police can get an explanation from a person, but in the status and with guarantees that are identified by the procedure code, in which there is no explanatory note, there is no such notion. So you never have to write or sign anything, because if they call me as a witness with the right to protection, I have the right to not say or write anything at all. And if we are to do this the right way, then we need a protocol and everything else. And these are just two examples of how systemic the problems are, because even in this sense, in the procedure sense, everything is flipped head upside down. Because the police is not guaranteeing freedoms and rights, but it a lot of times violates the procedure code. And all of that, the police should transform in order for regular citizens to be protected, and those that violated the law strictly following the procedure that their guilt would be proven. That's roughly, but I'll end with what I started with. If we want to seriously reform our police, first we need some serious political reforms that directly don't have any connection to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but they create the right political context. And then in that democratic context, we would need to reform the legislation, the procedures, the rules, and retrain the staff. And then go out and spend years earning the trust of the population. And if we do that in a good way, it will be easier for the police to work. Because I believe that no police officer will be happy if people look at them as like an enemy and not a person who, in uniform or without it, is there to protect our rights and freedoms.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhovtis, for your presentation. Dear colleagues, I guess we can get to our discussion, the question and answer session. We had several raised hands. I would like to, we have a participant, Galia Tepova, who was the first to raise their hand. Galia, are you ready to ask your question? We are opening the ability to turn on your mic for you.
Добрый день.
Good day. I am a master's student of the Academy of Law Enforcement under the Prosecutor General of the Republic of Kazakhstan. This topic is really interesting to me because it is also the topic of my thesis. Now, I'd like to ask if I can get acquainted better with the materials that were voiced during this roundtable discussion, especially yours, Nazgul. I really liked those materials. Can I get your contact information? Yes, Galia, please leave your contacts. And we, to everybody who will be interested, who is interested, we can send over the presentation and we can have you contact the experts. Thank you.
Я бы хотела следующее слово предоставить Юрию Анатольевичу
I'd
Гусакову.
like to present the floor to Mr. Yuri Gusakov. We say, hello, a big thanks for the invitation. I'm happy that in some way I can participate in what's going on. And it's not really a question. I have one specific proposal and a bit of a comment on what was said from Nazgul Galieva and Alexei Miluk. Mr. Miluk said that the reform is taking place, and that's good, and the numbers are there. And Nazgul Galieva is saying that the system of education needs to be critiqued, and we need to analyze the universities, but the universities are effectiveness. And my big question is why the state needs to prepare such a large number of specialists and professionals with the higher education, because at 45 years old, we are no longer using the services of these specialists. They migrate to security companies where they work as a security guard. So that's kind of to pose a difficult question to you. And then I'll say the following. We need professional police officers. We figured that out in January and we've understood that before. So I suppose that today, almost all of the education institutions that train specialists with higher education are no longer needed. Perhaps they need chairs to train the top management of police. And then I would say maybe, yes, they do need higher education so they can participate in managing and so forth. But I'll say it once again, we need professionals. That means that higher education these police officers need to no longer have. And we can argue about how that should take place. And for my proposals, it was well said by Ms. Yergalieva that in order to manage change, we need to involve staff. I would very much want those who come up with reforms and create plans of measures and appoint responsible people to remember their service as frontline officers, or to just be in the shoes of this street police officer who is out there in the field. And then my question would be that the Constitution of Kazakhstan currently prohibits professional unions amongst police officers. And when we orient our effectiveness, I mean, Kazakhstani police, when we test them for effectiveness, we talk about what they do in Germany, in Portugal, and France, that's good there, right? So if we're talking about a professional community of police officers that will allow them to focus on social and legal protection of police officers, things like wages, security during their service, reducing their working hours, and other issues. And we should be saying that this ban in the Constitution needs to no longer be there. This article of the Constitution, where it says that professional unions are not possible for police officers, needs to be rethought and redone. How? It's a different question. And in other developed countries, they have a lot of labor unions. For instance, in Germany, you have 2 unions of police officers. In Spain and Finland, they have 6 each. In the US, they have 6 professional unions on a federal level and dozens in each state. In France, they have 30 professional unions, and the absolute majority of them has identical functions. And a good example would be the French Union Alliance 3, which demands from the management of the MIA guarantees of safety, new staff, and taking additional measures that would help the police on the outskirts of Paris to be able to withstand armed attacks and counter armed attacks. So I can talk a lot about labor unions because I've spent much of my life with these labor unions, but I can give you the German example. For instance, the labor union of police in Germany was established in Hamburg in 1950, and they have 180,000 people. They have state managers, police officers, and others, and that union is part of the Union of German labor unions and the Association of European Police Officers. So getting back to the topic, I can tell you that no one out of the top management of in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, I mean, who's working in the building, in the departments, regional departments of police, has thought about the issues of the regular police officer. And there's a lot of problems. And if I'm just to name you the main four, the wages problem, it's there. And why should the salary be increased as per demand of top management and not those that have to live off this little salary? And the second thing is employment. As I said, that police officers who served a certain number of years should leave their department where they served and then should be employed. But where? Higher education has them hoping that they can be working in the judicial system, maybe will be a judge, maybe will be a lawyer, and all the rest, 80% will be just working and then working as a security guard after they served in the police. And the third problem is the increase of free time in reducing working hours. A regular police officer today can say that their work shift can be 8, 12, 24, 32 hours, and so on. But you can't do it like that. Police officer is also a member of somebody's family. They have kids to bring up. They should have a positive influence on the internal climate in their family. And we are taking away that ability from these police officers. And the last issue, the issue of safety and security. Now, the January events have shown how well we care for the safety of our police officers. We can give a 2 out of 5, 2 minus for that on a 5-point scale. So this buffer organization that will be created after, I mean, I hope it will be created, will allow to solve these issues, to consider them at the highest state level, and will be productive. And this buffer organization will allow to involve that staff on which the reforming problem falls down upon to solve these issues. Otherwise, we're going to get a negative reaction of the regular police officers on all the reforms done from above. So thank you very much for listening. And if anybody needs a written form of how to change the Constitution, I can send it to you based on the experience I have. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gusakov, thank you for a valuable comment. We will definitely ask you to send your proposal, and definitely will use them when developing further recommendations on reforming the police. We have a question from journalist Marina Popova. She's curious about digitization in the work of the police. Mr. Milik, this is more of a question to you. What is being done and what is the real effect that it should give in the work of the police, please? Thank you very much for the question. The Ministry of Internal Affairs focuses on digitization. It not only has to do with minimizing bureaucracy in managing documentation, but also it's to minimize corruption. A lot of effort has already been made, and most of the government services from the police have already been digitized. We've automated the administrative legislation process, and we're about to fully digitize the administrative cases that are being contemplated by the courts. We're introducing e-criminal cases, so even the criminal procedures are becoming digitized now. Currently, we're developing the technical products for the actions of the district inspectors. So all of that bureaucratic work that they have to do, the reports they have to provide that Nasco was talking about, this preventative accounting will all be digitized. And with the support of the OSCE, we've developed standard operation procedures, and they've been approved by the minister. They are digitized and will be available to the district police as a handbook on what to do in specific life situations that might occur in their work. So we're focusing strongly on that. We're carrying on our efforts. We've developed an app on submitting complaints, on getting feedback, which really simplifies the work of the police and makes it easier for the citizens too. Thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. I would like now to pass the floor to Jana Proshkevich. Jana is an active participant of the civil initiative. We demand an MIA reform. Please, Jana. Good day, dear colleagues. My name is Jana. Thank you, Tatiana, for introducing me. I am a member of the movement for the reform of the MIA, which you have already mentioned before today. I was one of the people who initiated the demand for service police. Apart from that, Tatiana, on behalf of the civil society who kind of ordered this reform, and we're watching closely all the pilot projects, we try to participate where we can. And we really await, looking forward to the results in those methodologies that are being developed based on the OSCE project and based on the other projects. I think we need both. And the next step, I see, and I'm speaking on behalf of me, but on behalf of our community, that society needs to research the best practices and the experience of the police themselves, because services are provided based on the level of Jean, could you please turn your video off, because your sound is lagging a bit. So we've talked a lot about countering torture, and I'd like to light up this important issue in a human-oriented way. So until our police officers internally, starting from training, are exposed to torture, and torture is not only physical torture, not only physical violence or sexual violence or threats of violence, but also torturing by not providing information in other ways. And joining in on what Yuri said, we do need also to implement research. In partnership with Penal Reform International, PRI, in 2018-2019, we implemented a pilot project on a positive transformation of the police force and the MIA in general. And there, our research has shown that the police officers themselves suffer from torture within their organization as well. And to all those methodologies that our colleagues provided, I'd like them to focus on an issue. And lastly, on behalf of our movement, I'd like to say that we really do need urgently research, systemic research, and that's it.
Спасибо большое, Жанна.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to give the floor to Халида Жигулова. Hello, everybody, dear colleagues. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you for organization. I would like to add to Жанna's words. I'm sure as many other citizens, are worried by the fact that violence is normalized by the police, violence by the police and by other law enforcement agencies. We do not have the human-centric approach, unfortunately. And moreover, we see that many approaches that are used in the police work, and generally when we talk about Ministry of Internal Affairs, they lack inclusiveness. They're not inclusive at all, actually. I will give an example. In 4 years that I've been dealing with the prevention of sexualized and gender-based crimes, and I have been sharing my suggestions to how we can improve the situation through adoption of different changes to the legislation. However, I constantly receive some resistance in this area. And just one more example, I sent a letter to the administration of the president to increase the measures against violence, especially when it also comes to domestic violence. There is a big relation between the domestic violence and violence in general, and the rise of crime in society. And what happened in January, all the lootery, all the marauders, it just means that some people in our country are just not afraid. They know if they beat someone up, nothing will happen to them. So on 9th of March, I received a letter from the Vice Minister, Murat Kojaev, and to all the recommendations from the human rights activists, we received basically a denial and some just bureaucratic answers that don't improve the situation in any way. Supposedly, it become more difficult to investigate the crime. There will be more divorces, there will be more the criminal files, and many more other arguments just to avoid the human-centric approach. And as a result, we see that this tolerance to violence among the policemen, among the executives at the Ministry of Internal Affairs, this is what it leads to. That's why we see the videos of how in the police just one meets the other. We also have information about rape among the police. So I suggest that in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, it's important to adopt the internal policy to prevent any forms of violence, including sexual harassment, bullying, mobbing, etc., or any other forms of violence. Secondly, we also need to make sure that education is provided to all the policemen. And thirdly, we need to change, or we need to review all the job instructions. We need to make sure that all these instructions are changed to include the inclusive approach and the human-centric approach, and keep in mind the rights of the victims, of the detained, of the arrested. These are all humans and they have their own rights. And of course, we need to respect all the conventions that our country is a signatory to. We need to make sure that police has a human face that we can trust. Thank you. Thank you, Халида. Айнур Аренова, please go ahead. from the National Center to Manage Personnel. Please, Ainur. Good afternoon once again, dear colleagues. I like using this quote. These are the words of the founder and the first general of Sony. He said the following: doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter what education you have, Harvard, Yale, at the end of the day, what matters is the people that you hire. So I urge you to think. I believe that the future of the police depends on the people who they hire. We can talk about the reforms, but the reforms will be implemented by the people. So we need to make sure that there are reforms at the level of selection and hiring. There should be a test against corruption. All the things you mentioned today, violence, lack of law, lack of rules. Basically, modern methods of testing allow us to identify all of those. We need to see. We need to look into that. We need to identify certain qualities. If you want to make sure that the law enforcement agents are more human, they need to have emotional intellect. They also need to have empathy and sympathy. And if you want to get rid of corruption, then you can also use certain testing methods to identify whether a person is inclined to corruption. So this is my opinion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Alexei Troshev, please. Thank you very much for invitation for such an interesting discussion. I just wanted to talk more about the new police, or the fact that we need new police. And I would like to support the suggestion of Yuri Gusakov regarding the profession. Is new police possible without the new profession of policeman? If we don't create new profession, then new police just won't be able to exist. Yes, we might need new people. Most likely we do. But if we leave all the structures unchanged, all the values unchanged, then they will be just consumed by the machine that exists today. So, if we look at the experience of those countries who moved away from the dictatorship to democratic societies, maybe Chile or Spain, we will see that it is a collective community of policemen, those who promote democracy and freedom. They became the driving force within the society, within the legal society, or within the policeman society. Those are the people who were able to do something so that these countries have fewer tortures. They can be called a trade union or maybe professional organizations. This is not the point. But this has become the impetus for democratization. But where will we get this new professional values? Sure, we can have a certain selection. We can try to make sure that these are the people with a strong civil society position, but all these values at the end of the day, such as do not steal, do not fight, do not tolerate violence, etc., etc. All of that is formed actually quite early on for children. So we need to have a significant change. We need to make sure that the policemen have a good education, not necessarily the best higher education. We don't need to have some military approach to their education. We need to make sure that they study their education early on. And we cannot delay it any further if we want to create foundation for the further generation. As for digitalization, we carried out a survey. It included the intolerance to any crimes. It's a zero tolerance policy. And people just need to communicate any crimes, even petty crimes. We had this survey in Pavlodar, and we came to a conclusion that mainly people complain about garbage, about the wrong parking, etc. This is what people think about. The local community thinks that this is the goal of police. Maybe clean up the garbage that was left, or tow away a car. So we do see quite a gap between what people expect the police to do and what the police actually has to do or can offer to us. And last but not least is about the sociological surveys. In Kazakhstan, it's quite easy to do such service about trust. They just ask people, do you trust? But in other countries, such questions are not asked anymore. You need to rephrase them, because trust can be described by 8 or 10 different indicators, and we can understand them better, much better this way, when they think about the police and have contact with the police. So of course it's good to have the service, but they're also quite expensive. Maybe international partners could participate here. We need to carry out this service by independent agencies. Thank you. Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions from the live feed from YouTube. So now I would like to address our main speakers and all the participants. Please, whether there is anybody who would like to say something, maybe comment, any feedback regarding what was said today. Maybe anybody else who's still here? Nazgul, please go ahead. I will just give a brief comment. I agree with many comments that were made today. Yuri, you're absolutely right in saying about the importance of the professional society. Since our time was limited, I didn't go into details regarding all the recommendations and suggestions that will be further developed. But it will also include professionalization. And having studied the experience of other countries, it's true that professional communities are very important player in the area of increasing the competences, because it is one society. I also agree with Alexei. This is what we did. We carried out a sociological survey in the capital. I actually did not ask the direct question, whether do you trust? Indeed, interpret this question in different ways. We also did not ask about legitimacy, but it should also be operationalized. So such question, whether you trust police, will not give much result. It's true, it's good to have such a survey, but as you also said, it's quite costly, and I said that many times we do need this indicator, but it's a strategic indicator. And a regional office or regional department might not just know what they should do better. This is why we say that there should be different optimization of indicators. We talk about the service police, and we need to clearly understand what it is and what kind of service police needs to provide us. And we need to manage the expectations of everybody involved. Like you said, police is expected to dispose of garbage and tow away the cars. Well, this is responsibility of the police to manage the expectations. So the question is that security in society cannot be attributed just to the police. It is a complex phenomenon which is put together by different factors. So safety and security, and how the limited resources should be used best. Well, again, this is a complex story. And each agency needs to think how they can do their work better. It's true that police is not responsible for the municipal management. It should be done by someone else. So, going back to the first suggestion that we want to have is the status, mission, and mandate of the police. We should have a clear understanding of what police should be responsible for. There should be high competence within this police, and specifically in these areas. And this will lead to a certain secondary question. What is the competence? How people need to be hired? Etc., etc. Because in my opinion, professional growth and professional education needs to happen all the time. Information keeps changing every day. And we need to be able to constantly develop and grow. We need to also understand the importance of these questions. Thank you. That was my comment. Thank you. Dear colleagues, we're all patriots of our country, and we all want our police to be better in Kazakhstan. Today we had quite detailed suggestions, and we truly believe that all of that can lead to good and deep reforms if there is enough political will. We can have great results, and the trust to police can increase as well. And we thank all the experts who were able to join us today. We thank for all the comments, and we express our openness to cooperation, to coordination, further development of suggestions, not only regarding the police reforms, but also the judiciary system. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Miluk to finalize today's event. Alexei, please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Tatiana. We understand that the police reform is important, it is needed, it is also timely. especially keeping in mind the January events. All the suggestions and comments are valuable, and we have certain responses to that, and the vision already, many of them are already in progress, specifically talking about the torture, and even some comments were made regarding the investigation being done by some other state bodies. This has been done a while ago. We're very open, you know that very well. For over a year, we have been cooperating with you. There are certain disputes and maybe some points of disagreement, but that's fine. It's all part of the process. It's all a part of the system. It's important that both parties are heard, and we need to have a certain vision of the reform. I thank everybody. We are ready, and we are ready to discuss the suggestions with you. Thank you. Thank you all. It's true that we have quite a good cooperation on many issues, including the development of the police activity. I thank everybody for the time that you're able to dedicate to this discussion. We will be connected, and as I said, we will be sharing all the materials with you. Have a good evening and all the best to you.